Hey there, pirates! Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. Luffy and the crew are already in Elbaf, that massive setting that's probably one of the most important places in the final stretch of the story. Not just because it's the land of the giants, but because everything points to Elbaf being like the beating heart of a forgotten era. And that's where something unexpected might come in. Kid's return. I think it would make perfect narrative sense for Kid to show up again right at this point, but in a totally different way than the version we saw through Wano and post-Wano. Back then, he was all cocky, trying to prove he was the strongest. But Shanks crushed him, destroyed his pride, sank his ship, took out his crew. There was nothing left. And that detail matters. There was nothing left because Kid has always been a character driven by rage, by a need to be acknowledged, by his hatred of the world system. But when you lose everything, again, something else starts to kick in. It's not about revenge anymore or being the next pirate king. It's about not wanting to be left behind, not wanting to end up as just another guy who tried and failed. That's the vibe I think Kid would come back with. I can totally picture him, totally broken, his mechanical arm all wrecked, maybe even without a crew at all, walking among the giants of Elbaf with that look of someone who has nothing left to lose, but without that old fire in his eyes either. And then he sees Luffy, and Luffy sees him. That reunion wouldn't be a fight. I don't think Oda would make them start throwing punches. Not after everything that's happened. It'd be more like that moment between Luffy and Bellamy back in Dressrosa when Bellamy was all beaten up but still proud. Only now it's Kid. And Kid, unlike Bellamy, had real spotlight. He was a true rival. He was on the same level. So, for him to ask for help, it'd mean there's nothing left inside, just a desire to keep going. And that's where the weight of him joining Luffy comes in. Obviously, it wouldn't be like Kid becomes an official Straw Hat, wearing the same gear as Usopp or Frankie, but I can totally see Kid becoming one of those allies who sticks with Luffy to the very end. Kind of like Law, just with a different energy. A broken rival who realizes that maybe, just maybe, Luffy is the only real shot left at being part of something that changes the world. Because if even Law, who's super calculating, already put his life in Luffy's hands, then maybe Kid, who's been left with nothing but a bruised ego, would do the same. Now think about this. Kid saw Shanks use haki at an insane level, probably advanced Conqueror's haki, mixed with observation and armament. And that's when he realized he's still light years away from that kind of power. And Luffy's already going toe-to-toe with Kaido. He's awakened his devil fruit. He's reached forms even the Gorosei are scared of. So Kid, who always saw himself as Luffy's closest rival, now has to face a hard truth. Luffy passed him. And not just passed him, left him behind. But the worst part for Kid, Luffy never cared about that. He never saw Kid as an enemy, just another guy on the same journey. And maybe that's why Luffy is the only person in the world Kid could ask for help without feeling completely humiliated. Because Luffy doesn't judge, he doesn't throw stuff in your face, he just accepts you. And if this really happened, I think Luffy would accept Kid without even thinking twice. Just like he did with Bon Clay, with Law, even with Caesar Clown back in Punk Hazard. Luffy accepts people for how they feel in that moment. And in this moment, Kid would be feeling the exact same thing Luffy felt back in Marineford. That crushing sense of helplessness, of not being strong enough to protect anyone. So Luffy would look at him and say, "Come with us." Now think about the narrative impact of that. Kid fighting side by side with the Straw Hats in Elbaf, maybe against Blackbeard's pirates, or even the world government, depending on how things play out. Man, that would be incredible, because Kid has that kind of raw, brutal, unrestrained power. And with Luffy guiding him, maybe he could channel it in a way that actually changes something. And don't forget, Blackbeard's already done a lot of damage. Ace, Garp, all of that is connected to Luffy. But we sometimes forget that Blackbeard's hurt people outside the main cast too. What if he hurt someone from Kid's world? Who knows? Maybe Shanks took Kid down to protect him from something he knew was coming. Maybe Kid finds out that going it alone just won't cut it anymore. And again, the only person who really makes sense to stand beside him now is Luffy. That's what I'm saying. This theory isn't about Kid becoming Luffy's best buddy and hugging it out on the ship every morning. It's about necessity, rebuilding, a broken pride, finding a place to still matter. I really think Oda is setting up this kind of twist for several secondary characters, and Kid's one of the ones who deserves it the most. He tried to go it alone. He tried to power through. He lost. Now, maybe he can try again with someone who's different, someone with friends, And let's be honest, seeing Kid fighting side by side with Luffy, maybe teaming up with Zoro or Sanji in a huge battle against a Blackbeard commander or even a Gorosei, that would be insane. But more than action, it would be about the journey, about redemption, about what happens when you let go of pride and realize what you really want is to be part of something that's gonna change the world for real. So yeah, the stage is set. Luffy in Elbaf, the ancient land that holds the roots of a forgotten era. And Kid, shattered, shows up on that same stage. Not as an enemy, but as a symbol of something bigger. The end of a cycle of arrogance and the start of a path toward rebuilding. And then comes what might be the most symbolic moment in this final phase of One Piece. Kid stops being just a rival and becomes an ally who represents the weight of loss and the strength of those who keep going after everything falls apart. And that's the turning point. Kid doesn't come back to win. He comes back to belong, and that changes everything. Because think about it. One Piece was never a story about the strongest winning. It's about who can keep moving forward. With others, Luffy has always won, not just because of his strength, but because he has people by his side. Kid never really had that in the same way. Sure, his crew was loyal, but everything revolved around his rage, his personal mission. But Luffy has a crew that lives, cries, and grows together. And now, Kid, standing in front of that harsh contrast, finally understands what he was missing. He had strength, he had presence, but he didn't have connection. And Shanks took everything from him to show him exactly that. Alone, you're not going anywhere. So the reunion in Elbaf between Luffy and Kid isn't just a cool scene, it's the birth of a new Kid. A kid who, maybe for the first time, will fight for something bigger than just himself. Now picture how that would be built up in the story. Luffy reaching out his hand, the Straw Hats maybe a little skeptical, Zoro with that look like this guy again, but Luffy calm, almost carefree because he feels people. He knows when someone's changed. And Kid, silent. No big speech, no shouting that he'll be the Pirate King, just staying there, accepting it. He doesn't even need to say much. The silence says it all. The break was real, and this new alliance wouldn't be all clean and smooth. Kid would still be explosive, challenging, maybe even questioning Luffy's decisions. But that's the beauty of it. Luffy accepts people as they are. He doesn't demand they completely change just to fit into the crew. Law never stopped being kind of distant. Kid would be like that too, just with a new foundation. Now, fast forward, the final war. Whether it's against the world government, Blackbeard, Emu, or all of them at once, the truth is this conflict will bring together forces that have never been on the same side before. The world is falling apart, and Oda's been putting the pieces in place for years. Kid, in that context, becomes the missing piece to complete the portrait of pirates who understand the real meaning of freedom, not brute strength, but unity. And then comes the full redemption moment. Kid on the battlefield saving Luffy from a fatal blow, or fighting alongside Zoro against an enemy that takes combined strength, or even going up against Blackbeard in a battle he knows he might not survive, but one that's worth fighting, because now he's fighting for something that doesn't end with just him. That's the new Kid. The kid who finally understands that inherited will matters more than personal ego. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.